Hi, it's Michelle with the Medicine Couch, and today we're going to talk about that misconception that PAs became PAs because they couldn't get into med school or they're somehow working through some program to become a doctor. Those are just huge misconceptions about the PA profession. I, like almost every PA I know, made a very deliberate choice to go to PA school instead of going to med school, and there's lots of reasons for it. Today in this video, I'm going to talk about the reasons why I chose PA over MD, and if I would still make that choice again, knowing what I know now, having worked in medicine for about 5 years. I'm also going to be talking about what you should be thinking about if you were one of those people who are deciding between PA school or med school. So let's dive in and talk about that first misconception that PAs go to PA school because they can't get into med school. That's really frustrating, and it just comes from people's lack of knowledge about what it takes to get into PA school. First of all, the prereqs that I had to take for PA school and that every PA has to take are very similar to the ones that are required for med school. I took biology 1 and 2, anatomy and physiology 1 and 2. I took cell biology, microbiology, virology, genetics, chemistry 1 and 2, organic chemistry 1, and several psychology courses. Those are just about the same requirements as med school, except for med school does have the added requirements of having to take organic chemistry 2 and also taking physics courses. I was in those prerequisite classes along with all the other people that were going to med school. So it was the same exact course, the same exact teacher, the same exact book. Not only did I take those same courses, but I maintained a 4.0 GPA the entire time I was in undergrad, and I graduated from an honors program. I think that it's safe to say that I could have easily also completed those other prereqs that were needed for med school. Now, of course, med school does require that very difficult test, the MCAT, that you have to take and do well on in order to get into med school. I'm not downplaying that. For PA school, you have to take the GRE, which is a much easier test. So let's talk about grade point average to get into med school or PA school. The average GPA to get into med school is 3.72, while the average GPA to get into PA school is 3.6. So yes, it's higher by just a little bit to get into med school. Another difference is that med school puts a high value on undergraduate research. While it's nice to have for PA school, it's not something that is required. However, to get into PA school, you do need to have anywhere between 2,000 to 3,000 hours of patient care experience, while med school only requires about 50 to 100 hours. And lastly, let's talk about how difficult it is, how competitive it is to get into med school versus PA school. For the 2019-2020 application cycle, the acceptance rate to get into med school was 7%. Do you know what the acceptance rate was to get into PA school in the 2019-2020 application cycle? It was also 7%. So they are both highly competitive, and the percentage of acceptance is not any higher in PA school than it is in med school. So hopefully you can see that people who are good candidates to become a PA and get accepted in PA school are highly intelligent, motivated people and could be competitive with any other med student out there. The second thing that I talked about is that people think that somehow when you go to PA school or when you become a PA, that you are just kind of working up a ladder to become an MD eventually. And that is not true either. There currently, that I know of, isn't any kind of bridge program to go from being a PA to being a doctor. And even if there was, I don't think most PAs would choose it. Again, because there's specific reasons that we chose PA in the first place. So let's dive in and talk about what those were for me at the time when I made the decision. At first, when I started undergrad, I was doing triathlons, involved in a triathlon club, and we talked a lot about injury and recovery, and I was very excited about those type of things. So I thought that maybe physical therapy, athletic training, something like that would be the route that I would go. But I did some shadowing for physical therapy, and it didn't take long for me to realize that I wanted to know more about medicine. So I started looking at my options, and I think I pretty quickly jumped to orthopedic surgeon. That's what I'm going to do, which I still think would be a very cool job to have. But when I started looking into it and realizing the path that it takes to get there, I had to be really honest with myself and realize that I wouldn't be really starting my career as an orthopedic surgeon until my early 50s. because I'd have to go to the longer med school, then I'd have to do a residency, then you have to do a fellowship. And I want to take a moment to say I highly respect physicians and the sacrifices that they make to go to med school and to go through residencies and fellowships. It is not easy, and it takes a significant portion of their lives. So, all respect to them. But when I looked at that path and looked at my age, I didn't think that that was viable. I thought that was probably not the smartest plan. And then when you factor in the cost associated with it as well, I realized that I would be in my early 50s, just really starting my career, but be like $300,000 in debt or more. And I just did not think that that was the smart move. And then when I found out about PAs, I started to get interested in that and looked into it a little further. And one of the big things that really caught my attention was that ability to be flexible in your career, the ability to come out as a generalist and be able to work in different specialties. So then I took a good look at my personality and realized that I really do embrace change. And while I am not flighty, I like to have options. And I realized that that was probably something that I wanted to build into my career. That really swayed my decision to go to PA school. Everything just seemed to make sense. It would be a shorter program. I would be able to start practicing and making money sooner, and I wouldn't be as far in debt, and I would have that flexibility in my career. So those were pretty much the big reasons why I chose to go to PA school over med school. Now, having practiced for several years, do I regret that decision? Do I think that if I went back and had to make that decision again, that I would choose MD? And there's a lot of things that are positive about being an MD, and a lot of things that I see could be better about my career if I was an MD. I think that the longer training program would suit my personality better, and I would have felt more confident. I think it would be amazing to have earned the respect that comes with being an MD. It would have been nice to be able to have a profession that I didn't have to explain to people all the time. When somebody asks what you do, I'm already trying to decide how to answer that question, because if you say you're a PA, some people know what that is and some people don't. Some people think you're a personal assistant or a public accountant. And then if you say I'm a PA, a physician assistant, then you have to usually try to tell people that assistant is not like a medical assistant, but that I'm more like the doctor doing the same kind of work, diagnosing and treating patients. It would be so nice just once to be able to say, I'm a doctor, and people would be like, oh yeah, I know what that is. That's awesome. But is that reason enough to go to med school? I don't think so. And then I'm also a little concerned about the place of the MD in medicine now. Unfortunately, most physicians are like employees at this point. They don't own their own practices like they used to. They're under the thumb of administration, being told what to do almost as much as we are. That would bother me so much more to have spent all of that time and money and to have that amazing education and then be told by people who know nothing about medicine what I should be doing. So while it's appealing to think about being an MD, I totally think that I made the right decision. So if you are in that position, if you are trying to decide whether to become an MD or a PA, what are the things that I think you should be considering? Well, I'm going to list them in no particular order, and I'm going to talk about money first, just because that's something that most people think about. MDs do make, on average, at least more than twice of what a PA does. And I have to say, often for the same work, especially when we're talking about like in family practice, we're usually seeing the same number of patients and oftentimes the same exact type of patients. So that is definitely something in the plus category for being an MD. You will get higher pay. And as you move up into the specialties as an MD, if you are like in neurosurgery or orthopedic surgery or something like that, you have the opportunity to make a really high salary, like 400, 500,000. Whereas if you work in those specialties as a PA, even if you are first assisting in the OR and a very integral part of that specialty, you're most likely not going to be making over 200,000 a year. Now you also have to figure in the cost of debt, how much it costs to go to med school versus PA school. Because as I said earlier, med school can cost over 2 or 3 times more than going to PA school. And that is a lot of debt to come out of school and say you have $300,000 to $500,000 worth of debt. Even if you're making a high salary, that is really hard to swallow. Let's talk about job growth next. Pretty much all jobs in healthcare are projected to grow. They were always in demand and always needed. But over the next 10 years, the MD profession is projected to grow by 4%, where the PA profession is projected to grow over 30%. And so there is much more opportunity on the PA side. Also, since I mentioned earlier, we do almost the same work, especially in family practice, for half the pay. It stands to reason as medicine becomes more and more of a business that clinics and hospitals are going to be looking at bringing on more PAs or NPs than they would MDs. Now, I don't think that this is a huge factor. I think that as an MD, you will always be able to find a job, but there may just be more opportunities for PAs in the future. Next, there's often the talk about lifestyle. This, I think, is very subjective, and it really depends on the practice that you end up in. Generally, I would say that physicians are required to do more administrative duties and are often on call more than PAs, especially if they're the surgeon. On the other hand, in a practice where MDs have some say over the APPs that work with them, they can kind of structure the practice so that they're seeing the kind of cases that they really want to see, and they can send the other cases and some of the grunt work to the PAs and NPs. And finally, because MDs make so much more than PAs, they could even go to a part-time position and still make a PA salary. Next, let's talk about that flexibility. MDs don't always get to choose what specialty they work in.
What?
If you really want to work in orthopedic surgery, but you do not test high enough on the USMLEs, then you are not going to get an opportunity to work as an orthopedic surgeon. And to me, that's very scary. And I would not want to end up in a specialty that I didn't really enjoy or that I thought I would enjoy, but I got in and realized it's not for me. And then I'd have to go back and do residency all over again. So like I already mentioned, the flexibility is really there for a PA versus an MD. However, there are some other things where it's not as flexible to be a PA. Those would be things like wanting to volunteer overseas or even volunteer at a local race or something in your community. As a PA, if you don't have a supervising physician who will sign off for you to do that, that they would be supervising you, then you can't do that. I also think it's harder for PAs to work overseas. MDs, while they still have hurdles they have to jump through, there are many more opportunities for a US trained physician to work around the world. And then finally, just like I said, the respect that comes from being an MD, if that's something that's really important to you, if a title is really important, then highly consider MD, although I think that's probably the wrong reasons to become a doctor. But if you're going to get into medicine to help people either way, that is something to consider. And also the opportunities that are afforded to MDs outside of medicine, either further up in administration or in being invited to be on different boards of organizations, or just business opportunities that people may come to you because they recognize what a physician brings to the table. So what if you have thought about it or are leaning towards PA, but you're not really sure if it's right for you? You may be wondering, what does a PA actually do? Well, you can watch these videos here and also go to my main channel page where I interview PAs and NPs working in various medical specialties and doing cool and unusual jobs. If you are a PA or an NP watching this video and you'd like to be interviewed and tell us all about what you do, drop me a comment in the comment section below or send me an email. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next time on the Medicine Couch. Bye.